Imagine this. On my daughter's wedding day, I hand her an envelope, anticipating a warm thank you in return. Instead, she toasts and reveals she had hoped for a different dad. I was left watching as she embraced her new father-in-law, and I quietly made my exit from the wedding venue. Once she tore open that envelope, the merriment of the day quickly morphed into a nightmare. Oh, and the envelope? It was filled with $45,000. Now, let me introduce you to Letitia. Her voice was sharp enough to slice through the calm air of her Bloomfield Hills townhouse like a hot knife through butter. There I stood, feeling awkward in her splendid living room, clutching my weathered cap with hands that bore the marks of years of labor. I felt out of place among her pristine white couches. Towering windows offered a view of a golf course-worthy lawn, the maintenance of which probably cost more monthly than I earned. Everything glimmered: glass tables, polished fixtures, and art pieces worth more than many people's annual income. "Tia, sweetheart," I started, though she was already absorbed in a sea of wedding magazines spread across the immaculate table, each glossy and imposing. "Look at this venue, Dad," she exclaimed, pointing to an image of an opulent mansion with grand columns, miles from the town hall or hotel ballrooms we used to imagine. "This is where the elite get wed, where my friends celebrate tying the knot," she said. My throat started to feel tight. I had dressed in my least tattered button-up shirt and shined my work boots, ready with a little speech about helping with her day, maybe pitching in some cash, setting up tables, whatever I could do. But when a $45,000 price tag came up, words failed me. "The flowers are $8,000 alone," she rattled, flipping pages with fervor. "The photographer wants $5. That dream dress costs $3,500, but it's exactly what I need. You've got to see it." Nervously, I reached for my phone to crunch numbers. My savings account held $12,000, the result of 40 years punching the clock at Ford. My Social Security just about handled the mortgage and essentials. Barely above a whisper, I admitted, "I've managed to save $12,000. That's what I can offer, although I could look at a small loan." Letitia's expression froze, her joy replaced by a steely look. "12,000?" she snapped, standing abruptly. "Fathers take loans, sell their cars, even get second mortgages. What are you willing to do for your daughter?" Her words struck like body blows. This was the same girl I'd raised solo after her mother, Elena, passed. The one I worked myself to the bone for, ensuring she wore new clothes to school, so she could eventually earn a degree and become the marketing sensation she is today. "Tia, I could try for a loan, but $45,000. I gestured vaguely at the lavish surroundings. "You're doing so well in life. Perhaps we could consider a cheaper option," she cut in, slamming a magazine down forcefully enough to scatter others. "You know Marcus's dad is covering $60,000 for his sister's wedding, and that's considered conservative for them." Marcus, her fiancé, with a father who owned countless eateries downtown. She persisted. "I'm 35 years old, Dad. This might be my only chance for the wedding I've envisioned. My friends' dads move heaven and earth for them. And you?" She looked me up and down, her gaze lingering on my worn-out jacket and nervous posture. "You're just a failure." Her words loomed overhead, heavy as smoke in a room damaged by flames. "Others get the weddings of their dreams. I'm expected to settle for a backyard gathering because my father isn't pulling the weight other parents do. Do you have any idea how mortifying that is?" I wanted to say something, to explain how the plant's early closure and the mountain of medical bills from her mom's battle with cancer had left me strapped, that I was really doing my best given the circumstances. But nothing came out. "You've had 35 years to figure out how to be successful, and this is what you come up with, $12,000. Her heels struck the hardwood floor, probably more than what my old vehicle was worth, as she moved to the door. "Just leave, Dad. I can't stand seeing you right now." The door shut with a thud that felt like it echoed right through my chest. For a few seconds, I lingered on her pristine driveway, jingling my car keys and staring at my battered Ford parked among my neighbor's shiny, pricey cars. That evening, air pressed on me like an unspoken judgment from Elena, watching from above. The truck's engine popped as it cooled in my driveway, and I just couldn't get myself to step outside. Looking out through the windshield, my house seemed even smaller than I remembered. A modest ranch from the 60s, its paint fading and gutters sagging slightly on one side. It was no match for Letitia's immaculate place. When I finally walked in, the silence hit me like a ton of bricks. I flipped on the lamp next to Elena's old reading chair by the window. It hadn't moved. She loved sitting there, dreaming up what Letitia's future would look like, talking through college plans, careers, and the life our daughter was meant to have. The photos on the mantel hinted at those better days. Snapshots from Letitia's high school graduation, her college commencement, family dinners when Elena was still with us. In every one of them, I wore a smile of pride. Had I been lying to myself all along? "Elena, what's the right move?" I spoke into the empty room. Our daughter deserves happiness. Maybe I'm a failure if I can't give her that. 40 years on the job, and this is what I've got to show: $12,000 and a daughter who just called me out. I headed to the kitchen table, buried under stacks of bills and bank documents. The mortgage book showed I had 18 months left to finish paying it off. Free at 70. My pension papers painted a familiar picture: $1,800 monthly, just covering the basics. Social Security tossed in another $800, already earmarked. I dialed the bank's 24-hour loan hotline and, after wrestling with the automated options, finally heard a real person. "This is Jennifer. What can I help with tonight?" "I'm looking at taking out a personal loan," I said, trying to sound more sure than I felt. $45,000. "I'll connect you to someone who can run through the options. Your name and Social Security, please." As I rattled off my details, I wondered how Elena might have reacted to such a leap. She was always the cautious one, the planner. Yet, she also believed love sometimes requires taking those risky steps. The loan officer mentioned setting an appointment, gathering documents, discussing terms. Her words faded into background noise. What mattered was the possibility. Maybe I wasn't on Dennis Hargrave's level, but I could still be the dad Letitia needed. She accused me of being a failure, and maybe there's truth in that. But failing doesn't stop a father from putting everything on the line for his daughter. I found the box of Elena's favorite tea in the cupboard, exactly where it had been for 3 years. Its aroma carried memories of her saying, "Dewey, that girl is our crowning achievement. Whatever it takes to ensure her happiness tomorrow, I'd be at the bank." That night, I laid out a plan to surprise Letitia with the full amount plus what I'd originally saved. Hopefully, she'd see that her old man wasn't down for the count yet. The alarm buzzed at 6:30 the next morning, but sleep had eluded me anyway. Chase Bank on Woodward Avenue felt intimidating at 10 a.m., more than I imagined. Towering glass and steel loomed beneath Detroit's gloomy skies. Security cameras tracked every move, a place where big decisions were reserved for those of great importance. I adjusted my best shirt and flipped through the folder of documents: pension details, Social Security letters, 40 years of diligent work history. Elena's voice urged me on. "Stand tall, Dewey. You're as worthy as any of them." The lobby hummed. Young professionals in sleek suits made deals probably beyond anything I'd ever see. I was lined up behind this woman who was casually chatting away about her investment portfolios. Eventually, a loan officer, probably around the same age as Letitia, called me over. Her desk had a nameplate that said Sandra Williams, Personal Banking. Mr. Gomez, come on over and have a seat. You're here about a personal loan, right? I nodded, saying, Yes, ma'am. I'm looking at $45,000 for my daughter's wedding. Sandra was busy typing away, pulling up all my financial info. Her expression didn't give anything away as she skimmed over the details. I see you've retired from Ford Motor Company. 40 years, isn't that impressive? Your pension and Social Security provide you a steady income. She paused to digest it all. However, we need to chat about some limitations because of your age and income level. That got my heart racing a bit. I asked, what sort of limits are we talking about? She said, we can max out at $35,000. Your interest rate would be 18% due to your age and being on a fixed income. She tilted the screen so I could see these figures that were making me dizzy. Are you sure about this, Mr. Gomez? I mean, it's 18% interest. I was trying to understand what that meant for my monthly payments, but it was all too much. Yeah, I understand the risks. This is for my daughter. Sandra was already organizing the paperwork, her tone going into that careful professional mode. The total you'll repay is $52,000 over 5 years, with monthly payments around $870. $870. That's more than half of my pension, but for her, it's worth it. Where do I sign? The whole ordeal took an hour. Credit checks, ID verification, pages of fine print warning me left and right. People kept coming and going, handling their own banking tasks while I sat there, about to make a choice that would change everything. Sandra explained the loan's impact on my budget, glancing at me with that type of concern reserved for older folks potentially making risky financial moves. Yet, she still processed it since the calculations technically worked. The loan got approved faster than expected. She handed me stacks of papers to sign and went through the payment plan and late fees. Sitting under those bright lights, it felt like I was committing more than just finances. You'll have the cashier's check right away, Sandra said, sliding a paper across the table. Mr. Gomez, it's crucial you grasp how this loan will affect your monthly budget. I looked at the check. With $12,000 in savings added to $35,000, I had $47,000, more than what Letitia even requested. Thank you, I said, carefully tucking the check into my coat. My daughter was about to get the surprise of a lifetime. As I walked to my truck, I felt this sense of accomplishment I hadn't felt in years, like I'd just tackled a massive challenge through sheer determination. Sure, I was a factory guy, but I could still provide for my daughter. The system had age and income restrictions, but love barreled right through them. I drove over to Bloomfield Hills with that check in my pocket, brighter than a torch, imagining Letitia's shocked face when I handed her more than she'd hoped for. The envelope felt weightier than reality as I rang Letitia's doorbell 2 hours later. Through the glass, I saw her coming in comfy home clothes, yoga pants, and an oversized sweater, probably pricier than my monthly grocery bill. Dad? She said, surprised as she opened the door. What are you doing here? I stepped inside, excitement bubbling up. The living room looked different, littered with wedding magazines and fancy vendor cards spread out like a deck of cards on the table. Tia, sweetheart, I said, pulling the envelope from my pocket like it was a precious artifact. I took out a loan. This is $47,000 for your dream wedding. But her reaction wasn't what I'd dreamed of. No joyful gasp, no tears of happiness. She just glanced at the envelope with a mix of pity and mild irritation. Oh, Dad, she sighed. That's not needed. Dennis is covering the whole wedding. He tells me I deserve the best. The news hit me like a slap in the face. There I stood, my hand out with the cash I'd busted my butt to gather. But I borrowed that money at 18% interest. Just give it back then. She shrugged, dismissing my efforts as if they were trivial, her attention already drifting back to her magazines. Dennis is doing this because he truly loves Marcus. Finally, I find someone who realizes I'm not some bargain option. And that "not a bargain option" phrase echoed in my head as I watched her browse through pages of extravagant venues and designer gowns, all funded by someone else's generosity. "When did Dennis make this offer?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Yesterday afternoon," she admitted, pausing as she realized she'd let something slip. "Right after we talked, he swooped in, saying no daughter-in-law of his deserved anything less than the best." Yesterday afternoon, while I was at home fighting feelings of inadequacy, preparing to gamble my financial future, Dennis Hargraves swept in with his effortless wealth and made me feel insignificant. "Look at this venue," Letitia said, waving a glossy photo. She was gushing with joy, rattling on about the grand ballroom at the Townsend Hotel. Dennis had booked it for the entire weekend. And that photographer? Snapped the governor's daughter's wedding last year. I held the envelope tight to my chest, feeling a bit foolish to have thought 47,000 would impress anyone in such a world. "The flowers alone are costing 12,000, she chatted away, not spotting my silence. According to Dennis, money isn't an obstacle when it comes to her happiness. Isn't that just marvelous? Someone finally seeing her worth. Someone beyond an old factory worker surviving on a pension. "Dad, you okay? You look a bit off." "Just tired," I lied, as I tucked the envelope back into my jacket. "Probably should return this to the bank." "Sounds good. No use paying interest on funds you don't need." She was already back at her magazines, absorbed in planning a wedding funded by another's love. I headed to the door, my steps echoing down the pristine hallway. Behind me, I could hear her humming as she turned the pages, immersed in dreams that no longer needed me or my sacrifices. "Thanks for thinking of me, though," she called as I reached the handle. "It's sweet what you tried." Sweet that I tried. A bit like a kid pretending to be helpful with adult responsibilities. I sat in my truck for a long time before starting it up, blankly staring at her house through windows that reflected nothing but my dumbfounded expression. Just a few miles from Letitia's place, I had to stop. My hands were trembling too much to drive, and that envelope felt like it was scorching through my jacket. 40 years of giving her everything, and now I'm just a backup, easily replaced by someone with a bigger checkbook. An empty auto parts store parking lot seemed just right. Forgotten, just like how I felt in my daughter's life. I turned off the engine, letting the silence wrap around me. "Elena, what would you say about our girl now? Would you still call her ours, seeing how swiftly she overlooked all those years of love?" The drive home seemed longer than ever, passing by Detroit's vacant lots, where factories once thrived, and boarded-up houses, echoes of lives worked away for nothing, people like me. But first, I had a task to accomplish. Sandra's eyebrows rose when I walked back into Chase Bank, not long before closing time. "Mr. Gomez, is everything okay? I need to cancel the loan. Early repayment fee? I'll pay it." Her polite smile faltered, hinting at concern. "Are you sure? We just finalized it today. The penalty is $500 for early repayment." "I'll cover it. I don't need this loan anymore." Sorting out the paperwork took about 15 minutes. Sandra seemed to have questions, but bank professionals know when not to pry. I signed the forms, watched her cancel the loan, and handed back that cashier's check that had seemed, just briefly, a token of my grand gesture. "Your account will be charged the fee by morning," she said, sliding over a receipt. $500 to get knocked down a peg. Worth every cent. Home felt different. Not heavy like before, but cleaner somehow. I went ahead and made Elena's favorite tea, settling down in her reading chair while giving the photos on the mantel a good look. There was Letitia's high school graduation pic. In it, she's got her arms around me, whispering, "Thanks for everything, Dad. Couldn't have done this without you." Then, there was the college graduation snap. "You made this possible. I'll never forget your sacrifices." When did gratitude shift into just expecting things? How did my love turn into something she just handled instead of treasured? Maybe it's about time I stopped desperately wishing for any tiny bit of acknowledgement from my own daughter. The wedding invitation was still on my kitchen table, cream-colored with shiny gold lettering. "The honor of your presence is requested." Honor, huh? Interesting choice of words. I picked up the phone to call Letitia but decided to wait. Tomorrow would do. Tonight, I needed to mull over what kind of dad I wanted to be, given whatever was left of our relationship. The tea was a mix of chamomile and mint, one of Elena's special brews. She always said it helped her think clearly. I took my time drinking it, watching the evening sky get darker through dirty windows in a house that really... I owned this clunker that was barely hanging on because I couldn't afford to repair it after I'd burned through all my savings. But still, even with an empty wallet, it felt like I was finally able to take in a breath of fresh air, something I hadn't felt in ages. The next morning, my mind was unexpectedly clear. I shook up my routine a bit. Instead of immediately ringing Letitia, I brewed some coffee and browsed the morning paper. My phone buzzed at 8:30, but I shrugged it off for once. A voicemail popped up. "Dad, call me back. We need to chat about what you're wearing to the engagement party." Engagement party? That was news to me. I didn't call back until 3 hours later. Letitia didn't waste any time asking, "Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you." I shrugged it off, saying, "Oh, just reading." "What's this engagement party about?" She mentioned it was happening Saturday night at Dennis's. "No big deal, just casual," she said. But her voice slipped into that cautious tone I was annoyingly getting used to. "Maybe it's best if you didn't come," she suggested. "Dennis's friends will be there, you know. They're part of a certain circle." A certain circle? Like I was just a step she'd climbed over. I asked, "And what circle is that, Tia?" "Well, you know, professionals, entrepreneurs." She started to explain, but let it fizzle out, alluding to how they might not connect with a retired factory worker like me. She added, "Don't take it the wrong way. It's just easier this way." Easier. Everything between us was all about making things easier for her. As April moved forward, a pattern set in. There were wedding planning meetings I wasn't included in, and appointments were scheduled at times I was conveniently unavailable. The list of situations where my presence would be awkward just kept growing. By early May, our calls became routine. She'd float requests masked as favors. I'd offer help, but it was never quite what she wanted, and she'd gently steer me away from anything too big. I got an invite to her dress fitting, but it had strings attached. "You can come, just don't talk too much and wear something nice. Do you have anything that fits?" she asked. I turned up at that bridal shop in downtown Birmingham wearing my best shirt and tie. The place was as fancy as a jewelry store, with marble floors and sparkly crystals, dresses displayed like their treasures. Letitia's friends were there too, all dressed up in designer outfits, casually chatting about their weddings and mentioning photographers with fees that surpassed my annual earnings. "Hey ladies, this is my dad," Letitia introduced me with a sort of apologetic touch. "He's quite simple, but he's got a good heart." Simple. That word floated in the air, marking me like some unwanted label. I kind of hovered in the background as they chatted about gowns and reception plans, feeling more like I was security than a guest. There, but unnoticed. One of Letitia's pals leaned over, lowering her voice just enough for Letitia to hear, yet loud enough for me to overhear. "Your dad's really nice. It's great you included him." Right, as if I was some kind of charity case. Later that night, I found myself heading towards Woodland Cemetery, the first time since Elena's birthday. Her grave was simple, marked by a straightforward headstone with her name and dates, surrounded by daisies I'd planted a while back. "Elena, this isn't working. I can't keep doing this," I murmured, crouching beside the stone to clear some weeds from the flowers. It was time for the truth to be spoken. The cemetery was unusually silent, the only sound a faint buzz of cars from 8 Mile Road. Normally, being there was comforting, but this time felt different, like I was standing on the edge of a significant decision. I recalled what the social worker had once mentioned. One day, she may want to know about her real parents. Perhaps today was that day. On my way home, I stopped by the drugstore to grab some stationery. Writing the letter was tough. It took me 6 tries, each draft ripped up until the words finally fit. 2 days later, when I sealed the letter in its envelope, my hands felt steady for the first time. My eyes wandered over to the wedding invitation on my kitchen table. The time printed didn't match what Letitia had told me. It was 2 hours off. Staring at those blurry numbers, the reality sank in of what my daughter believed my role would be on her wedding day. St. Paul Church was striking against the May sky, its Gothic spires reaching into the blue. I parked the car at 5 to 1 and double-checked my invite, ceremony at 1 WAD. Everything was timed perfectly. As I climbed the church steps, organ music spilled out through the heavy wooden doors. Yet something felt wrong. I played the prelude longer than I should have, trying to calm my jittery nerves. Straightening my black tie, the same one I wore to Elena's funeral, I made my way to the entrance. A woman in a smart navy dress rushed by, blurting, "Headed in? We're so late." I checked my watch. 12:58. More folks hurried to the church, sharing that familiar look of anxiety and regret for arriving after the event had begun. Beyond the thick oak doors, I heard not only the organ's deep tones, but also a choir responding to a ceremony already underway. An older man in a charcoal suit paused beside me, mopping his forehead with a handkerchief. "Running late too?" he asked. "They started at noon. Traffic on the lodge was a nightmare." My hand froze on the handle. Noon? My invite said 1. He showed me his invite, which, except for one crucial part, was identical to mine. His listed 12-ard in the same elegant script, while mine said 1 Brie. They both looked professionally done, legit in every way, but mine had obviously been altered so I'd miss my daughter's special moment. "Probably just a mix-up," he suggested with kindness, although his eyes said he understood the reality. Through the stained glass, I could see everything. Letitia was radiant in her white dress, Marcus handsome in his tux, and right up front sat Dennis Hargrave with his distinguished gray hair in the father of the bride spot where I should have been. Dennis had walked her down the aisle, playing the role of her father. And here I was, standing outside, my invite trembling in my hand, realizing that in a few moments, 35 years of being Letitia's dad had been erased with a simple date change. I had been reduced to nothing, an afterthought who arrived too late to matter. Guests continued to enter the church, leaving me to face this betrayal alone, not just left out, but purposely misled to miss my daughter's big day. I folded the invite carefully and walked back to my truck, but stopped at a small park nearby. The envelope in my jacket felt unbearably heavy now. Its contents weren't a last resort, but something that couldn't wait any longer. Some truths needed sharing now. Sitting on a park bench, I watched more guests hurry inside St. Paul Church. Sitting there with the envelope in my hands, I watched as fancy cars filled every available spot and finally came to terms with the fact that I never truly belonged in Letitia's world. Unable to bottle up 35 years of lies any longer, it was time for her to learn the truth. I tore open the envelope that I'd intended as a wedding gift. It once held $47,000, painstakingly saved out of sheer necessity, but now only contained a letter. I'd poured nights in May into writing it, haunted by Elena's memory, realizing some secrets cut deeper than honesty ever could. 4 neatly penned pages unfolded, telling a story Letitia had never heard, about the call that turned our lives upside down, about a pregnant teenager unable to care for a child, and about how Elena and I, childless, grasped this unexpected miracle. It began, "My dear Tia, there are things you need to know before starting this new chapter of your life. Truths about your identity and what you lost today by turning your back on the man who raised you." I resealed the envelope, ensuring its contents were final. The cash meant for her present returned to my wallet. I had given up being the financial cushion. This gift would demand more than money ever could. "Forgive me, Elena," I murmured. But Letitia had to know. She had no clue what she had truly let go of today. Church bells rang out, signaling the end of the ceremony. Through the intricate stained glass windows, I caught snippets of movement as the bridal party geared up for their big exit. Soon, they'd usher everyone to the reception, where congratulations and gifts awaited, and where I'd nestle into the crowd, holding my present with resolve. I stood, brushing the dust off my well-worn suit, the same suit I wore to both Elena's funeral and Letitia's graduation, the go-to for life's big moments. Today would be its last bow. Looking into my phone's camera, a new face stared back. Not that of a desperate dad yearning for acknowledgement, but of someone newfound, ready to stop accepting less than deserved. The envelope, now light, felt purposeful in my hand as I crossed the street toward the church. Behind me, the empty bench marked where Dwayne Gomez, the old me, had vanished, making way for someone entirely new. As I reached the doors, they swung wide, and wedding guests flooded out into the sunlight, their faces lit with joy. I eased into the mix of well-wishers, edging toward the reception. It was time to present my daughter with the wedding gift she truly needed. The reception buzzed with energy as I entered, holding the envelope casually. Guests mingled around tables draped with fine linen. Champagne flutes glittered in the sun shining through large windows. The air was thick with the scent of opulent flowers, roses and lilies, that cost more than what I get monthly. In the receiving line stood Letitia, radiant in her gown, with a smile I remembered from when she was little. Marcus was beside her, while Dennis hovered proudly, basking in the glory of his generosity. I navigated through the room with newfound confidence, as if people sensed I was on a mission. "Dad." Letitia's voice was a cocktail of actual relief and subtle nervousness. "You made it? I was worried when you weren't at the ceremony. There must have been a printing error with the time." Her voice carried that polished lightness she used to smooth over tricky situations, as though missing out on walking her down the aisle was just a mistake, not a deliberate choice. "No problem," I said, managing a calm tone and stepping forward with the envelope. "Just a little mix-up. Congratulations, you and Marcus." I handed the envelope over with deliberate seriousness. "Tia, here's a gift for you. It's significant." When I spoke, something about my tone made her stop and really see me for the first time in a long while. The envelope was ordinary, cream-colored like the rest, but my expression made her hesitate. "Thanks, Dad. That's really thoughtful," she said, the same casual word she used every time I sacrificed everything for her happiness. Then Dennis showed up, all smiles and hospitality, reaching out with open arms. "Finally, Dewey. It's great to meet you. Letitia's mentioned you so many times." I faced the man who had stepped into my shoes, shaking his hand with steady determination. "I'm sure she has. You've been quite kind to our family." Dennis grinned and draped an arm around Letitia's shoulders like it was the most natural thing. My new daughter deserves nothing less than the best. The best, I thought, apparently excluding the man who raised her. Dad, I want you to meet some friends, Letitia said, already steering towards the guests. She handed the envelope to Marcus, saying, "Put this with the gifts, sweetheart." I saw the letter vanish into his hands and land on the gift table loaded with presents. Nestled in that pile of gifts was a truth that would change everything. "Beautiful ceremony," someone commented to me with a smile. "You must be very proud." I nodded, eyes following Letitia as she mingled, basking in the attention and praise. Yes, extremely proud of how it's all turned out. Nearby, the photographer zigzagged through the gathering, snapping memories of celebration. As the room pulsed with lively chatter, I wondered if maybe he'd caught a snap at the precise moment of the gift handoff, memorializing that instant when fairness masqueraded as fondness. I snagged a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, melting into the crowd, watching and waiting. Letitia glided through her role as the center of the celebration, engaging with every face that offered admiration. The envelope lay untouched among the gifts, ticking like a dormant catalyst. She'd soon understand what it feels like to lose a father who truly loved her. She'd realize what she had with the dad who nurtured her, compared to a stranger who wrote a check. I sipped on the champagne, sharing smiles, playing the part of the proud father, albeit for the last time. The clinking glassware sounded like wedding bells, gathering everyone into a semicircle around the glowing couple. The Renaissance Center's vast windows beautifully framed Detroit's skyline under the warm afternoon sun, setting the stage for Letitia's crowning moment. With her champagne glass lifted high, her voice strong and assured, she addressed the room. "Thank you to everyone who made today possible," she declared with grace. The photographer hurried to capture her radiant smile, her gown shimmering like delicate silk under the lights. Eyes turned towards her, filled with warmth and anticipation. "Especially Dennis," she said, her gaze fixing on him among the crowd. "You've shown me what having a truly loving father feels like. I've always dreamed of a dad like you, and today, that dream is fulfilled." The air was sucked from the room. Conversations stopped abruptly. Glasses paused mid-air. The happy hum of celebration dissipated into a heavy silence. Eyes darted to me, but quickly looked away. People suddenly seemed engrossed in the floor or floral arrangements. The photographer's camera clicked, capturing the moment in time. "Dennis, you've been the father I never actually knew," Letitia said, moving towards him with open arms. "Thank you for showing me genuine kindness." Dennis accepted her hug with satisfaction, embracing the new title she'd bestowed upon him. His victorious smile held his new daughter close, unfazed by replacing the man who spent 35 years nurturing her. "Letitia, you're the daughter I never had," he proclaimed, his voice resonating across the room. Silence filled the space, tense and unyielding. A few folks started clapping hesitantly, but their applause faded as they grasped the harshness of what just went down. Some were whispering to each other, hiding behind cupped hands with that embarrassing kind of cringe you feel when you're watching someone fall apart in public. I stayed put, not a single ripple in my champagne glass, watching as she hugged her new dad tightly, tossing away over 3 decades of love like it didn't measure up. My face stayed calm, no anger, no sadness, just a peaceful acknowledgement of her true self, and the realization that I no longer needed to play pretend. Not too far off, about 20 feet away, the gift table held my envelope nestled among the luxe presents from Dennis's wealthy friends. Soon enough, she'd recognize the real cost of her cutting words. I quietly set my glass down on the nearest table and headed for the door without any fuss or confrontation, making a graceful exit from a place where my presence was clearly surplus to requirements. Behind me, the reception gradually bounced back to its cheerful vibe. guests pretending they hadn't just seen a daughter verbally diminish the man who brought her up. The photographer kept snapping away, catching moments of joy, although later some folks would ask if he could somehow erase that unwelcome toast from memory. Once outside, I passed through the heavy doors into the concrete surroundings of the parking garage, my steps echoing in the space. The envelope with the adoption papers waited among the wedding gifts, ready to reveal to Letitia the gap between wanting a different father and realizing the one she thought she had never truly existed. My truck sprang to life on the first try, as reliable as always. I drove through Detroit's afternoon traffic, surprisingly calm, as familiar neighborhoods unfolded outside my window like the pages of a well-read book. 35 years of being a dad wrapped up, not with anger or tears, but with a quiet acceptance. Finishing it all felt like reaching the end of a long journey. At home, I moved from room to room, collecting the items that truly mattered for the next chapter. I slipped Elena's wedding ring into my shirt pocket, and a photo of all of us at Letitia's graduation, back from when you could still spot gratitude twinkling in her eyes, went into my travel bag. The tools I'd earned through years of hard work deserved a fate better than just collecting dust. The phone started ringing around 4:30. "Dad, we're opening gifts now." Letitia's voice bubbled with excitement. "You won't believe what we got. Like crystal from Ireland from Marcus's aunt." I let it go to voicemail and continued packing, one piece at a time. Then, 10 minutes later, it rang again. "Dad, are you there? We found your envelope. What's inside that needs to be opened in private?" By the third call, as I neatly folded my best shirt, the one I'd worn when I thought I'd be giving her away at the wedding, her voice shifted from excited to uncertain. "Dad, I read your letter. This isn't funny. Call me back right away." By the fourth call, confusion had turned to panic. "Dad, this can't be true. You're lying. Call me immediately." I unplugged the phone, sifting through decades of memories to decide what would help me in the future. Suddenly, the house felt lighter, as though dropping the burden of obligation made the very walls stand with renewed strength. My phone buzzed endlessly on the counter. Missed calls jumped from 20 to 30, then hit 44. In the voicemails, I heard Letitia's voice breaking as she faced a truth she hadn't expected. She was just 3 when we adopted her after an accident took her parents. We chose to love her fiercely, strangers who made her ours. 35 years, not spun into lies designed to wound, but protecting her, loving her enough to shield her from pain until she was ready to hear it. "You're not my real father," she said. "Then who am I? Where do I come from?" Even then, she failed to see the divide between biology and choice, between merely creating a life and nurturing it with boundless love. "Dad, please, I didn't mean what I said at the reception. Come back," she pleaded. But she did mean it, and that's where the problem lay. I packed the truck as the sun sank lower, painting the sky with orange and pink hues, Elena's favorite colors. By the time I reversed out of the driveway, still glancing back at the modest house where we raised a child who wasn't our own by blood, but was still, undeniably, ours, the missed calls had climbed to 51. In that envelope were adoption papers that revealed everything. The names of parents who were taken from her too soon, the crash that left Letitia alone in the world, and the happiness Ela and I felt when we heard from social services. Letitia spent the day opting for wealth and prestige over loyalty and sacrifice. Yet now, she faced the reality of choosing strangers over the man who willingly became her father when life didn't give her one. The highway heading south lay before me like a ribbon pointing toward endless opportunities. Detroit's skyline slowly disappeared from view in my rearview mirror. Sinatra sang "My Way" on the radio, as the last bit of daylight turned Michigan's fields into a soothing blanket of gold. When I reached the Ohio state line, The number of missed calls climbed to 53, so I switched the phone off. "Elena," I murmured to her photo taped on the dashboard. I finally did what was needed. 35 years of offering love to a child who couldn't appreciate it. Now, it's time to do something for myself. Keeping a constant 65 mph, the truck hummed as it took me toward an open-ended future. Cincinnati, Louisville, or another spot where winter's chill wouldn't touch these old bones. A fresh start in a place where nobody knew my past or expected me to explain my decisions. Little towns passed by outside, places where people valued hard work and reciprocated kindness, where a retired mechanic at 68 could start anew without having to make excuses or ask for respect. A thermos held Elena's favorite coffee mix, bitter but comforting. My road atlas, marked with red pen, sat ready on the seat beside me. Making plans was refreshing after so many years of catering to Letitia's demands and disappointments. "Letitia, you wanted someone different as a father," I said to the vanishing road. "Now you've got him. I hope Dennis lives up to all you hoped he would." Discovering the truth about her adoption would shake the stability she'd thought she had. At the wedding, she had to drop the boasting about her wealthy new stepdad. No more snide comments about the man who had been there from the very start, changing diapers, teaching her to ride a bike, and putting in long hours to pay for her college. Now, she would face deeper questions, the kind that money couldn't solve. Who was she really? What was her true history? What had she given up for the sake of choosing wealth over real love? Sure, Dennis Hargrave could pay for lavish weddings and fancy clothes, but he couldn't wind back the clock and give her 35 years of genuine devotion. He wasn't there to tell bedtime stories, help with school assignments, or beam with pride on her graduation day. He couldn't replace the genuine love she now realized had been there, given freely and by choice, not obligation. As highway signs ticked down to unfamiliar yet promising horizons, towns like Toledo and Dayton came into view. These were places where I could just be Dewey Gomez, not the dad who couldn't meet his daughter's unfair demands. My truck's headlights sliced through the growing darkness as I drove toward whatever tomorrow might bring. Detroit, with all its memories, no longer held me. Ahead lay a newfound freedom I'd almost forgotten was possible. The phone rested quietly in my pocket, its 53 missed calls dissolving into history with each passing mile. Letitia had made her choice long before today. The adoption papers merely laid bare the full cost of choosing others over the man who loved her when the world left her alone. Now, at 68, with perhaps 20 more good years to come, if not more, they were now mine to cherish. Embarking on this new journey, the radio played old tunes while Elena's photo caught the dashboard's light, blessing me. We left behind 3 decades of grueling work in pursuit of endless potential and peace. At last, I felt free.